Hey friends, in today's episode I am sharing with you 20 amazing Dollar Tree projects I know you're going to love. For this project you'll need 2 of Dollar Tree's decorative wood trays. I'm going to start off by sanding all of those edges with a fine grit sandpaper because they're pretty rough and they have a few little splinters. I'm going to do that for both of the trays. You could paint or stain yours whatever color you like. I'm going to be using Waverly's Antique Wax. It's pretty dark and thick, so I'm going to water it down. This will lighten the color and I won't have to use as much antique wax. It also spreads very well. Once I've applied a coat to the entire tray, I will take a dry paper towel and blend that in and wipe any of the excess off. Then I will repeat that process with the second tray. I will set them to the side and allow them to dry. We're using a votive glass candlestick from Dollar Tree. They have various different sizes. This one measures about 6 inches tall. After removing the label, I'm going to give it a really good cleaning. And now that our 2 trays have dried, we're going to make marks because we're going to make a 2-tiered tray using that candlestick. Taking the top part of the candlestick, we're going to center that in the bottom of one of the trays and just draw a circle around that rim so we know exactly where to place it to glue it down. Using the other tray, we're going to flip that over to the bottom, and using the bottom of our candlestick, we'll center that up and make a mark using our pencil. So I did measure mine to make sure I get it centered so everything is lined up, but you could eyeball it. Once you have your mark in place, we are going to attach the 2 using E6000. You want to put a very generous amount of E6000 around the rim of the candle holder, then set that down in your circle that you've already marked. Then we're going to put a generous amount of E6000 on the bottom of that candle holder and flip our tray over and center that up. I set a small bottle of paint on the top tray to give it a little bit of weight and allow the E6000 to seal all of the pieces together. Now that E6000 has set up, this is turning out so pretty. You could paint your candlestick, but I really like the clear look of this. To decorate it, I am going to use some greenery from Hobby Lobby and place that all around the bottom. On the top, I'm using one of these metal birdhouses from Dollar Tree. I think I found this last year. Now I want to cut that metal piece off at the bottom, so I'm carefully taking some tin snips and cutting it off right on the inside so that it will be able to sit flat on the top. Then I have this mini bird's nest that came from Hobby Lobby, and I made some tiny eggs using some air dry clay, and I'm going to put these 2 birds that I gave them a makeover. These came from Dollar General a couple of years ago. I think this project turned out absolutely stunning, and I would love to know what you guys think. We're starting off by using 6 of these wood cubes with the drawer inserts from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to take that stain and I'm going to go over all of these pieces. So when we put our drawer inserts back in, we're going to put that design that's on there to the inside so we have the flat side to the outside of the drawer. Now I'm going to attach 2 sets of 3 together using hot glue. You could also use wood glue if you don't have any stain there and you just have the bare wood. As you're gluing this, you want to make sure that you keep them flush to the top side as well as the inside, because not all of these boxes are the exact same size. So on that side, you want that to be flush on this side, and you'll see why in a minute when we put everything together. Then we're going to place those in there, set them to the side. We're using one of these wood trays and one of these house signs from Dollar Tree. The house sign measures 4 5/8 across and 6.5 inches from top to bottom. And the tray measures a little bit more than 4 5/8 from side to side and 6 5/8 from top to bottom. We'll pop that back part of the house sign out, sand that down, and then I'm going to peel the sticker because I'm going to use the back part as the front, but I did sand the other part or the back part of that sign because I'm going to paint it as well. I'm going to stain the tray with the same stain as well as the frame for the house, all parts except for the inside part bottom of the tray. I'm using some of these quart paint stir sticks. You can get these from Lowe's. And I cut that down to get a straight edge and then hold that in place to make a mark so I'll know where to cut, and we can use this to cover up the handles on the inside of the tray. So you're going to use one of those quart paint stir sticks as well as one regular size craft stick. You'll cut 2 of each of those down, and they're going to fit perfectly inside this tray to cover up that handle. Then I'm going to use that same stain and stain those as well. While they're drying, I'm going to take some black chalk paint and paint the back part of our house sign, as well as very carefully paint the bottom inside part of the tray. And this will take 2 coats. Now that everything has dried, I can attach those craft sticks into the inside of the tray to cover up those handles. And this is how it should be looking once you get those in there. And I'm just going to hold them in place using hot glue, and I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. Then we can attach the backing to our house frame, and see here I painted the back side of that as well. Taking 6 of the tumbling tower pieces as well as 6 wood cubes, these come from Dollar Tree, I gave all of those a coat of black paint. Now they're going to be going on the bottom of our drawer inserts, and these will become the feet. So you want the front part of the tumbling tower piece and the side piece to be flush to the front and each side of the front of your drawer sets. And then place one in the back. And you'll do the exact same thing on the other side. So you have one on each side and one in the back, and make sure they're flush to the front and the sides. Then we'll take our tray and our house, and we're going to attach them to the drawer sets. You want the bottom of the tray to be flush with the bottom foot on one of the drawer sets, and also flush to the front because the tray itself is not as wide as those drawers, so you'll want to hold that in place and keep it flush to the front of the drawer set. Then we can attach the other side using hot glue, keeping it flush in those same areas just like we did the other side. And see, this is what I mean about the back is not as thick as those drawers, so you want to keep it flush to the front. Then we can add hot glue to the sides of the drawers and the top of that tray so we can add our house and keep it flush to the front and push those sides in to get all that glue to adhere. Now I wanted to create a shelf for the inside of the tray, so I'm going to take some of those wood cubes and glue those right into the back of the tray in the center where the bottom 2 drawers meet. And I ended up using 3 wood cubes on each side, and that will bring it flush to the front part of the tray. Then I'm going to take some of those paint stir sticks as well as some of those regular craft sticks. Just like we covered the inside handles of the tray, I'm going to cut those down so we can create our shelf. You'll need 3 of the regular craft sticks. One of these is going to cover up the front of our shelf, and then 2 of the quart paint stir sticks. I'm going to give each one of these a coat of that brown stain, and then if any areas need to be touched up, I can go in and touch those areas up with the stain. Then I'm going to take those 6 wood cubes that we painted black and line them up into the center of each one of the drawers. Then I can attach each one using hot glue. I didn't measure them because these drawers are not exactly the same, so I just eyeballed it and tried to get them as centered as possible. Now I take my hair dryer, go in on the high setting, and try to remove all of those glue strands. Then we can attach our craft sticks to our wood cubes on the inside of the tray. I started off by going through the bottom first, add those 2 sticks with the hot glue, then I can add the other 2 sticks on the top part of those wood cubes. And then once everything is in place, I can take that last one and glue it to the wood cubes in the front to give it a nice finished look. You'll start off with some garden stakes from Dollar General. You can get these for $1 each. They're about 3/4 of an inch square, and they measure almost 35 inches right above that tip. You will need 4. I'm showing you 3 here, but you will need 4 of those. We're going to cut 2 of those down to 34 3/4 of an inch, which is right above the little tip at the bottom of the stake. Once you have those 2 cut, you're going to take the other 2 that you have and cut down 5 pieces at 8 inches long. Because these are garden stakes, the wood is extremely rough, so you'll want to go over each of your pieces and give them a really good sanding, especially the ends, making sure that they are as flat as possible. Using those 8-inch pieces, mark them from the left-hand side at 1 5/8 of an inch, as well as 6 3/8 of an inch. You'll do that for each of those boards. Make sure that your marks are in the center of each of the 3/4 inches of this board. Then we're going to take one of those, clamp it down to a piece of wood to protect our work surface, because we're going to use a 5/16 drill bit and drill all the way through that piece of wood. Try not to go through your work surface. You'll do that for all 5 of those 8-inch pieces. To make sure each of those holes we drilled are completely smoothed out, I'm going to go over all of those with some sandpaper to remove any of these splinters from the drill bit. So it should be looking like this. Each one of your holes are lined up in the correct position, and you have those 2 longer stakes. Line your 2 longer pieces together, and we're going to make a mark at 1 inch and then every 8 inches. So you'll have one at 1 inch, 9 inches, 17 inches, 25 inches, and 33 inches. Using that extra piece of garden stake that we cut off of the 4th one, I'm going to use that to line the 2 longer pieces together. Then you're going to take your 8-inch pieces and place them where you made those marks on each of those longer stakes. So you'll have one at 1 inch, the second one at 9 inches, the third one at 17 inches, the 4th one at 25 inches, and the last one at 33 inches. You're also going to need some larger clamps and some wood glue. I'm using Gorilla Wood glue. You want to put a very generous amount on each end and then place those with the holes on the sides at your marks that you made on your longer stakes. You'll do that for all 5 pieces, and then you'll want to go back and clamp those together to get a really good seal. If you don't have enough clamps to do all 5 pieces, you could just do 2 at a time, but allow your glue to thoroughly set up. I let mine set up for several hours, and it is very sturdy. I'm going to go over all of that excess glue with some sandpaper to sand that off, because I'm not going to be painting mine. I want to keep mine this natural color. You could go back and add some brad nails on the outside of your 8-inch pieces if you want to, but I find that this is pretty sturdy for the home decor piece that we are making. Because I'm not painting mine, I did erase all of those pencil marks and give it another really good sanding. We're going to use some of Dollar Tree's nautical rope. Now, it has a lot of those furry pieces on it, so I'm very carefully going to take my lighter and singe most of those off. Now, I'm doing this over a silicone mat. You just want to be extremely careful if you choose to do this. I'm going to do that for the entire rope. Then we're going to feed that through the holes on one side. And once you get to the end, you want to leave a little bit of excess rope so that you'll be able to tie a knot. Get your knot really tight, and then you can cut the excess nautical rope off of the end. And then I like to add a little bit of hot glue at the end of that just to make sure that it doesn't unravel. Then you'll want to pull each of your pieces pretty tightly, and then at the other end you'll cut off and leave enough to tie another knot at that end, trying to get it as close to your wood piece as possible. And again, cut that excess off, hot glue a little bit at the end. Then we're going to flip it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. I found these absolutely beautiful beaded frames at Dollar Tree. They are the perfect color that match these garden stakes. So that is why I'm not going to paint mine, but you could certainly paint yours to match our inspiration piece. You'll need 4 of those. We're going to line up the beaded portion of the frame with the nautical rope, and to secure that in place, I am using some Gorilla Hot Glue. You just want to center it up inside of the square there and hold it in place before you go to the next section. You'll do that for all 4 frames, and once you have that final frame in place, this is how it should be looking. Everything is centered and you are still able to access the backing where you can replace and change out your pictures. Now, if you want to reinforce it, you could add some staples over top of the nautical rope. Just be super careful not to make the staple come through the front of the frame. But I found that the Gorilla Glue holds up beautifully. These wood rounds are sold in stores only, but if you can't find them at your local Dollar Tree, no worries. I found the exact same item minus the hangers at Amazon. I have a link to my Amazon store in my description box below. All you have to do is click on that link, go to Crafting Supplies, and as soon as that pulls up, you'll see those wood rounds on the top left. You can get 12 of these for $12.99. They're the same size and the same thickness as the ones at Dollar Tree, and they're just a little bit cheaper. We're going to measure from the right hand side over and make a mark at 7.5 inches. Take a piece of painter's tape and line that up. Make sure you get a good seal on it. This is basically about 1/3 of the wood round. Then measuring from the top, we'll make a mark at 4 inches, and measuring from the bottom, make a mark at 4 inches so that you could place your painter's tape on those areas. Make sure to wrap it around the edge because we are going to paint the edge of this round. If you're worried about bleed through, you can always go over the areas that you're going to paint with some Mod Podge. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to take my time and add 2 thin layers. You just don't want to glob that on there and have it bleed underneath the tape. So I'm going to add 1 layer to that top section as well as the outside edge. Then I'm going to get the outside edge on the left hand side of the wood round, and then I'll go ahead and paint that bottom section, and I'm just painting this with a black acrylic paint. Once the first coat dries, I'll add the second coat and allow that to dry before I remove the painter's tape. Once all of that is removed, we're going to take some painter's tape, line it up with the black line at the top, seal it down, and do the same thing for the one on the bottom. We're going to paint that center section with some white acrylic paint. It's going to take at least 2 to 3 coats. Also get that outside edge, and you don't need to paint all the way across. You just want to make sure you get your paint at least past the line on the left, because we are going to cover up that 1/3 on the left with something else. Now that the white paint has dried, I can remove that painter's tape. We're going to turn it around to this side. We're going to take Mod Podge and add a layer of that right on that natural wood area, making sure you get at least up to the black line and bring it all the way to the edges at the bottom. Let that Mod Podge dry. Now that it is completely dry, we're going to set this on a heating mat. We're going to use some scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby. It has this beautiful herringbone design on it. Line it up with the black lines. We're going to take a piece of parchment paper and a mini iron. This is my absolute favorite way to Mod Podge paper, fabric onto wood or any type of hard surface. You just gently go over it with this small iron. It reactivates that Mod Podge and it seals it directly to the wood. Then we're going to remove that parchment paper and let it cool down. Because this paper is pretty thick, I like to go around and create a crease around the wood round, and then using my finger sander, go in one direction all the way around to remove that excess scrapbook paper. I have this finger sander as well as that mini iron listed in my Amazon store, and the link to that's in my description box below if you're interested in it. And this is how it's looking so far. To protect the paper, we're going to add a layer of Mod Podge. I'm also going to do this over the painted surfaces just so everything has the same sheen. We'll set that to the side and let it dry. I created a decal on my Cricut and I used the font Hello Honey, which you can find for free on dafont.com. And I know that not everyone has a Cricut, so I have this as a free printable on my website, and the link to my website is in my description box below. All you have to do is go to Free Printables and select this. You can download the PDF and print this at home, trace it onto your project, and then fill it in with a marker or paint. And any of the decals that you see in my videos are available as a free download on my website. We're now going to apply that right in the center of the painted white portion of the sign. We're using 3 wooden dowels. You can find these at Dollar Tree. We're going to place the first one where the paper and the paint meet. Take a pencil and mark out the curve at the top and bottom of the sign. And then I'm using my handheld miter shears to cut these angles. And this is also listed in my Amazon store if you're interested in those. Once we have both ends of that cut, we're going to lightly go over it with some sandpaper to smooth them out. And then we're going to attach that one right at the edge of the paper using some hot glue. We're going to turn it to the side and take that second dowel and line it up between the painted black and white parts and do the exact same thing. Now you could paint these dowels, but I chose to keep mine in that natural color. I thought that was pretty, and I also thought that this would give it a nice 3D effect. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and this is how it should be looking. Now we're going to flip it over to the back and go ahead and create a hanger for it using some twine and hot glue, and then I'm going to reinforce that twine with a piece of ribbon, and I'll do that on the other side. This is just really going to help that twine stay in place because these boards are too thin to put any type of staples in. I have some boxwood greenery from Walmart. I'm going to cut 2 of the stems off, place them end to end, and hold them together using a piece of twine. I'm going to bend it a little bit to form the shape of the top of the sign, and then I'll wrap that excess twine around it. That's going to give us a good base to be able to hot glue this to our sign. I'm also going to create a bow using some 2.5-inch wired burlap, making a very simple bow, just folding that over in the middle, pinch it together, and then we can tie that with a piece of twine. Then we can take that twine and attach the bow to our greenery by tying it in the back. Now leave your excess twine on there because we're going to do something with that as well. Then I found this cute little burlap flower that I bought from Dollar Tree, and we're going to attach that in the center of the bow using some hot glue, and I decided to add 3 natural wooden beads on each of the pieces of twine hanging down, and I can double knot that at the end. I'm also going to add a little bit of glue to make sure that they stay in place. Cut that excess twine off, and then we can attach this to our sign a little bit off to the side, like right at the top of that dowel, using a good amount of hot glue, and this is how it turned out. For this project, we're using 2 of Dollar Tree's wood house-shaped pieces. They're fairly thick, and this is the barcode in case you want to look that up online. If you can't find it in your store, you could also use a scrap piece of wood. These measure about 5 inches across and from the top to bottom about 7 inches. I'm going to use my hair dryer to easily remove both of those labels. We're also going to be using some of these wood planks. They come in a package of 6 and they measure 4.5 inches square. You'll need 2 of those. We're going to put the house pieces on one side, and using some wood glue, we're going to apply that to each side of the house and add a little bit of hot glue just to hold our wood plank in place so that we'll easily be able to turn this around and add our other wood plank on the other side, again using the wood glue. Then you'll want to take some larger clamps, and you can find these large clamps at Harbor Freight, And you'll just want to clamp each side and allow that wood glue to set up. It's going to give it a nice, strong, sturdy hold. Once it has completely set up, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and go over the entire piece, just smoothing it out, but also removing any of the excess glue that may have seeped out. Once you wipe that down, you can then paint it or stain it the color of your choice. I didn't have any stain color that I particularly liked on hand, so I'm going to take some Waverly Antique Wax and splash a little bit of water in there just to thin it out and give it a lighter color. Then I'm going to apply this on the entire outside of the piece using a soft brush, and before that dries, I'll take a dry paper towel and go over it to remove the excess and blend it in. I'll do this around the entire piece, and then some of the areas where some of the glue seeped through and maybe you couldn't sand it down, or just the imperfections in the wood. If you want to cover some of that up, just take some of your antique wax, add it over top of it, and instead of wiping it off, just take your cloth or paper towel and just dab it in. Or you could leave it with the variation of colors if you like that. But I kind of wanted mine to blend in better, so I used that method to kind of darken some of those lighter areas up. Using one of Dollar Tree's metal corrugated plaques, this one measures 7 inches square. I'm going to remove the hanger, and then I'll find the center point. Where that groove is for the center, you can bend this. It's very bendable. It's kind of easy. It's not super sturdy. You do have to kind of work with it a little bit. You want to bend it almost to an L shape. Once you get it like that, you'll set it on top of the house. And originally I wanted to use just this one sign, but when I set it on top, it's not quite long enough on the sides, and I didn't like that, so I'm going to grab a second metal corrugated sign. And once I remove the hanger from that, I can overlap these two pieces together. So I'll need to flatten out my first piece and then overlap them. And it's going to have about 3 grooves on each end that's not overlapped. And you can just set this on top of the house and kind of make sure you have the equal distance on each side. Once I know exactly where I want to bend it, I'm just going to bend that over just like we did our first sign, bending it into an L shape. And I am putting the 2 holes on the inside, so at least when they overlap, you'll only see one set of holes on the roof. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other piece. Once I have those bent into shape and I like the way they are conforming to the top of the house, to reinforce them a bit, I'm going to take some E6000 and apply that to all of the areas where they overlap. This is just going to kind of give it a stronger bond. And then I'll put the clamps in place on each end just to make sure that that E6000 sets up and that these 2 pieces are glued together. Once that glue has set up, I'm going to set this on top of the house. Now, you could leave it in the center and make like a house-shaped roof, but I kind of want mine to have a porch, so I'm going to push that tin more towards one end like this. I'm going to take my drill and pre-drill some holes at the bottom and top, and then add these tiny little silver nails that match this corrugated metal perfectly. You'll want to do that on each end. So you'll have a total of 8 nails in there, 2 on each side at the top and the bottom. So it should be looking something like this. Now I want to create a base for this, so I'm going to use one of Dollar Tree's signs. This has like a faux wood look on front of it, so if you wanted to stain it, you could. I'm measuring the width of the tin portion, so I make sure I have enough of the base. I'll measure and mark that out, and I'm also going to do the length of the tin. So once I have that measured and marked out, I'm going to set this on a cutting board and then using my utility knife, score it a few times, and then this will break right off. And if you have any little extra pieces, you can trim that down with your utility knife. Again, I'm going to make it the exact same width of the house, so I had to score and cut the other side as well. Once I know this is going to fit perfectly, I'm going to take a wooden dowel. These come in a pack from Dollar Tree, and I want to make posts for the front. So to cut that angle, I'm just going to hold the dowel at the top of the tin and make a mark, and then using my handheld miter shears, and I have this listed in my Amazon store, and the link to that is in my description box below if you guys are interested. I'm going to cut that angle and then hold the base at the bottom to make a mark so that I'll have the right length. Once I know it's going to fit properly, I will cut the dowel down for the other side, so we'll have a post on each side, and I'll just use that first one as a template. And then I like to run this over some sandpaper to make sure the ends are nice and smooth, so when we get ready to glue them, they will adhere flat. Now we can glue our house onto our base, and I'm going to make it flush to the back and the sides. And then once we have that set in place, we can then add in our dowels for our posts in the front. So I'm just using some hot glue, but you could certainly use a more permanent glue if you like. Once I have both of those dowels in place, I want to add something a little bit extra in the front for a design. Using the same size dowel, I held that in place, made a mark, and cut that so that it would fit in between the two dowels that are already on there. Secured that in place with some hot glue. Then I'm going to take another dowel and put that at the peak of the roof, make a mark right above that center dowel, cut that down, sand it, and I always like to make sure that it's going to fit before I put any glue on there. Once that's glued in place, I want to hold a dowel up off to an angle on one side. I can make a mark right below the tin so I'll know exactly what angle to cut. And then I can hold that in place and make my marking at the bottom, which is sort of going to look like an L shape so that it will fit in between those two dowels. Once I know that's going to fit perfectly, I can put the hot glue on there and hold that in place, and I'm going to create one identical to go on the opposite side. You could use a super glue for this. I found that by using hot glue, it held it there instantly, and I didn't have to clamp anything. If you need to add extra glue, you can do so. Then you want to go back, make sure you remove all your glue strands. And I'm using some sandpaper to kind of sand off some of the clumps of glue. Now, because I used hot glue, I'm not going to be able to stain this or use the antique wax because that's not going to stick to it. So I can leave it the natural color or paint it. I'm going to show you guys a couple of photos of it staged natural before I go back and paint it, and you'll have to let me know which way you like it better. I debated on whether or not I wanted to paint this white or black, and I decided that black would look better with my decor, so I painted all of the dowels as well as the base in the front, and I think it turned out gorgeous. But I would love to know what you guys think, and you can even add a battery operated votive to give it a little bit of warmth right there on the porch. Next project, we're going to measure from the left hand side and make a mark at 4 inches and do the same thing on the right hand side. Place a piece of painter's tape on those marks. We're going to paint the center section with 2 coats of a white acrylic paint and then let that dry. Then we're going to remove that tape, but save it because we're going to reuse it. We're going to make a mark at the bottom. We're going to make that 2 inches up, and we'll do the same thing on the other side and place a piece of tape on that 2-inch mark. Then we're going to paint the top and bottom pieces with 2 coats of that white acrylic paint. Let that completely dry before you remove your tape, because then we're going to take some more painter's tape and place that on the white lines so that we'll be able to paint that natural wood area a different color. So you could paint yours the color of your choice. I chose to paint mine with a celery green chalk paint, and this will take 2 coats. While that's drying, we're going to be using one of Dollar Tree's MDF wreath base forms. This one measures about 12 inches. I wanted mine to have a slightly lighter color, so I'm going to give this 2 coats of an acrylic paint in the color khaki and let that dry. Now that the paint is dry on our wood round, we're going to remove all of that painter's tape. Now the next step is optional. I decided to take one of Dollar Tree's furniture markers, and this is in the color oak, and go over each of those lines just to give it a little bit more dimension. You'll want to let that completely dry. I created another decal. This is using the font Hello Honey from defont.com. And also another decal to put below that. I can't pronounce the name of this font, so I'm going to put it on the screen right here. I'm going to place that on the painted green section, and then we're going to flip it over and make another hanger just like we did in our previous wood rounds by using some hot glue, twine, and some ribbon. Now that our wreath base form is dry, we're going to attach that to the front of our sign, which fits perfectly. We're going to do that using some hot glue. And then I have these really cute wood cutouts that Dollar Tree was selling in the springtime. And I'm going to leave these in the natural wood color because it matches that wreath base form perfectly. And hot glue 1 flower and 2 birds right there at the very top. I'm using a square. You can find that at Dollar Tree, 73 of the tumbling tower pieces, and some Gorilla Wood glue. Because it's so difficult to get this out of the top of the glue bottle, I'm going to put this on a paper plate and apply it using a Q-tip. We're going to start off with 5 of the blocks, and we're going to line them up on the side and the bottom, applying the wood glue on 2 sides of the second piece, and you want to put a nice generous amount and go all the way from one end to the other. Then we can line that up with our first one, push our third one really tightly, and then we'll take that fourth one and again apply glue to both sides of that. So we'll then have a set of 5 once we push that final piece together. And you want to apply a good amount of pressure to make sure you get a good seal with all of your glue. We're going to repeat that process and create additional sets of 5. Don't worry about if you have glue seeping out of the top or the bottom. Just take a wet wipe or a wet napkin and wipe that off. If you wait just a minute or 2, you'll be able to move it to the side and create your next one. You'll create 4 sets of the 5 blocks. While that glue is setting up, we're going to grab 5 more blocks. We're going to glue 3 of those vertically together and then glue the other 2 horizontally above those, pushing them all together very tightly, getting a good seal on all of that glue, and we're going to create 3 sets of these. Once all of your glue has set up, we're going to take those sets and using a very large square, we're going to glue each of these together. We're going to start off with the set of 5 that are going in the same direction. Then we'll add the next piece that has the 3 at the bottom and the 2 at the top. And you're going to want to push them together as you're gluing each piece to make sure you get a really good seal. We're going to do that and alternate the pattern until you have all of those sets glued together, and it should be looking something like this. Now we're going to take 6 blocks. We're going to glue 3 of them horizontally and 3 on top of that vertically, and you'll want to make 3 sets of these. So they should be looking something like this. Then we're going to take 3 blocks and we're going to glue those together and make 4 sets of 3. We're going to take 2 blocks and glue them together in the shape of an L. You'll want to create 4 sets of these. Set all of your pieces to the side and thoroughly allow your glue to cure and set up. Using the 3 sets of 6 and the 4 sets of 3, we're going to glue these together. We're going to alternate the patterns. So you have 3 of those going horizontally, and then you'll take the set of 6 and glue that with the 3 going vertically next to it. You'll just alternate this pattern until you have glued all of these blocks together, just like we did with the previous blocks at the top. So it should be looking something like this. Using the L-shaped pieces, we're going to glue these to the sets of 3. The 2 middle ones we're going to glue directly in the middle, and the 2 on the outside are going to go all the way up to the edge. You just want to press really firmly and try to remove as much excess glue as possible. So you'll have 2 on the outer edges and then 2 in the center of the blocks of 3. In this area here at those 3 sections, you could add some metal hooks because we are making a shelf. However, I do have some of these wooden angels from Dollar Tree. They're just these wooden pegs. So I'm going to remove the wings, the glue, and then sand any of that glue residue off because I wanted to have mine all wood. Then I can glue each one of these in the center of those 3 sections and let that glue set up. I've allowed the glue to cure for a couple of hours, but before I put these 2 pieces together, I'm going to go over them with some sandpaper to remove any of the excess glue and to make sure everything's nice and smooth. It just makes it easier for me to sand these separately before I put them together. Then I'm going to wipe them down really good, and I'm also going to be attaching some sawtooth hangers that I already had in my craft room that came off of some other projects. And I want to hang these on the back side of this piece just because it is a shelf. I want it to be really sturdy in case anything heavier is sitting on top of it. Once I have those in place, we can then attach these 2 pieces together. So you're going to take the piece that has the straight blocks going across it. That's going to be on the back part of your shelf so that your designs where they're alternating will be in the front. So it's going to look something like this. You'll want to apply a generous amount of wood glue to the top of each of those L pieces as well as the top of that back piece. And then if you have some large clamps, that's going to be really helpful to seal all these pieces together and really let that glue bond for several hours. I let the glue set up overnight, and this is a very sturdy shelf. It is so cute. You could make this for just a couple of dollars. I love the fact that you could use this as a key holder. It's very sturdy with the sawtooth hangers on the back. And I love this wood design, so you could paint it the color of your choice, but I do want to be able to see that wood grain and the wood design. So I'm creating my own stain by mixing some antique wax with some water. And depending on how dark or light you want it to be, would be depending on how much water you want to add to it. I just like this lighter color brown. I go over the entire piece, including the back, and I think this turned out so beautiful, but I would love to know what you guys think of this project. We're going to be using 3 of these Dollar Tree signs. They measure 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches. Now, because I'm making a pair, I'm actually going to be using 6 of these, but I'm going to show you how to make one. After removing the backing, I'm going to give each one of these frames at least 2 coats of white chalk paint. Some of them will take 3 coats, and I did make sure to paint the back side as well. Set one of the frames off to the side. We're going to be using 2 of them, will actually be 4 if you're making a pair, and using some of these quart paint sticks from Lowe's. You get 30 in a pack for $1. To create a pair, we're going to be using 24 of these. I'm going to cut the rounded end off with my handheld miter shears. You can find this in my Amazon store in the link in my description box below if you are interested in those. Set it inside the groove of the backing of the frame, make a mark to know where to cut so everything will sit and rest inside the frame. So you'll need 6 for each frame, which is a total of 24. For the other 2 additional frames that will be the centerpieces, we are using this corrugated metal sign from Dollar Tree, so you'll need 2 of these. And I'm going to hold that inside the grooves so that I can cut the side down that has the hanger on. I'm going to make a mark using a Sharpie so that it will rest inside of the frame at the top and at the bottom, and then I'll connect those 2 lines. Of course, I just grabbed whatever was closest to me, which happened to be a level. To cut this, I'm using some tin snips, so you want to make sure that you are very, very careful to not cut yourself, because this tin is very sharp. Once you cut it, the edges will be extremely sharp. So you may want to wear gloves and probably maybe even some eye protection if you're trimming some very small pieces off. I found that it was easier to cut up the line until my tin snips couldn't reach anymore, and then come in from the side and cut that down and continue until I get to the end. Now for the bottom part, we're going to do the exact same thing by lining it up inside of the grooves of the frame, making our markings, drawing our line, and then cutting that down, making sure that everything will fit inside of the frame so that we can put the backing back on. Now before we put the backing on, I'm using some of this scrap wood that I had. It measures about 1 inch wide and it's about 1/4 inch deep. I am going to hold this under the frame, so the front part of the frame is resting on the wood, and then I'm going to draw my angles out from each corner. So I have the wood lined up from one corner to the other. I'll draw those angles out, and then I'm using my handheld miter box and saw, which mine, by the way, is so old and rusty. I think I need to purchase a new one because it's getting quite dull. I'm going to go through and cut all of those angles out for that piece of wood. Once I have those cut down, I'm going to put this back inside of the frame to make sure that it sits inside of it. So it's not sitting in the part that's resting where the back goes back into it. It's actually fitting inside of the frame. So once I know that's going to fit, I'm going to take the same wood, hold it underneath, and go from the other corners, make those markings as well as the marking in the middle, because we're going to cut this into 2 separate pieces so that when we put our X back into our frame, everything will sit flush with the wood piece that's already in there. Again, I'm going to cut all of these down with my handsaw and place them inside of the frame to make sure everything's going to line up and that everything is going to fit perfectly. Again, because I'm making a pair, I am going to create 2 of these. So once I have both of those cut down, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper to sand all those rough edges out from all the end pieces that I have just cut. And then I'm going to create a stain. I'm using antique wax, and I'm going to mix some water. So it's about a 1:1 ratio of water to wax, and I'm going to shake that very thoroughly, and it's just going to give us like a very light, watery, thin type stain. I'm using a lint-free cloth to go over each one of our paint sticks that we have cut down. I'm doing the front and the sides, as well as the other wood pieces that we cut out. Again, make sure you get those sides because you will be able to see those. So as they're drying, we're going to take the picture frames and we're going to use a foam brush and the same water antique wax mixture, and we're going to apply these to the frames. So originally I was going to use a chip brush, but I decided not to because the foam brush was giving me the effect that I was really going for. So you're just going to take a layer of that water mixture and go around the entire frame, especially on those inside edges, because you will be able to see that once the project is complete. I only had to put 1 layer on, And it does take a little while to dry because it is watered down. So just be careful and be patient and allow them to thoroughly dry before you handle them. Now here, mine have already dried, and I'm going to use some clear Gorilla Glue. Now the manufacturer recommends that you dampen the area before you apply the glue. So I'm using a wet paper towel and dampening the side of the frame, then applying the Gorilla Glue, and I'm going to add just a couple of dots of hot glue to temporarily hold that in place so that I can add the frame at the other side. So once I have these two added together, I'm going to place some clamps on there and make sure everything stays flat and even, and then I'll add the third frame to the other side. So this is going to create 2 of our shutters, so each one will have 3 frames. I'm going to place those clamps on there and allow that Gorilla Glue to thoroughly set up. So I let mine set up for several hours. While that's setting, I'm going to focus on the backs of the frames. Now this is not completely necessary, but since the paper doesn't peel off and the wording is a little bright, I wanted to take some regular copy paper and cover up that wording just in case you could see through it. So you only need to do this for 4 of the frames because the one in the middle will be completely covered, but the one with the paint sticks, you may be able to see between those paint sticks because we're not going to be gluing those down. So once I have all of that in place, my glue has now set on my frames. I wanted to add a little bit more stability to the back. So I'm going to use my staple gun and staple the seams between the 3 frames. I just added a couple in between each of the frames. Now we can take our paint sticks and apply those in the top and bottom frame. I'm not attaching them with glue. The backing will hold that in there, but that's why we covered the backing up in case you could see in between the paint sticks because they're not perfectly straight. In the middle one, we'll place our corrugated metal piece, put our backing back on, and then we can flip this over and add our wood X piece right across the metal piece. Again, I'm going to make sure everything sits in there flush before I attach it, and I'm going to just add some hot glue to the bottom edge of each of the corner pieces and then glue that down to the sides of the frame. So as you're pushing that down, if you get a little bit of glue that comes out, make sure you go ahead and wipe that off. Then we'll do the exact same thing for the other side. I like to place them inside of the frame as I'm gluing the other piece down so I can make sure the end pieces that cross line up perfectly. And again, I'm putting this on the bottom part of the piece of wood so it doesn't ooze up through the top. So now that I have this together, it has a little bit of weight to it, and I want to add even more stability to make sure these 3 frames don't come apart. So I'm going to take some of these smaller craft sticks that you can get at Dollar Tree and hot glue those in between where each one of the frames meet, so you'll have 4 on the back. But make sure you push them over enough so that you don't see it from the side when you hang your piece up. Of course, repeat this with your other one, and now you have a pair of beautiful wooden shutters. I love how these turned out. They look gorgeous just by themselves, but they also look really beautiful as a grouping with a nice picture or something in the center. I'm using this craft panel that you can find at Dollar Tree in their plus section for $3. It is 12 inches square, and I will be using 2 of these. Now I want to go over it with some sandpaper because it's pretty rough, and I want to make sure that the entire frame itself is smoothed out. Then I'll wipe that down, and you could stain this or paint it. I wanted mine to have a slightly darker color than what it currently is, but not as light, and I didn't really have anything that I really liked. So I'm going to take 2 different paints and mix those together to try to get the color that I'm going for. So I have a burlap color, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a darker color, which is coffee bean, to just darken this frame up. And you want to make sure that you make enough paint to be able to paint both of your frames so that you don't run out and they'll kind of have a consistent look. But this is the base that we're going for, so I am going to add some more detail to this, but I'm going to paint just the frame itself on the inside edges, the outside edges, and the top, but not the middle, and I'll do that for both of the frames. It does dry a little bit darker, so now that it's dry, I feel like I want to add a little something to it so it doesn't look so plain. So I'm going to take some white acrylic paint and a Dollar Tree stencil type brush and dry brush this white paint over top of it. Now this is just a personal preference, you don't have to do this, but it does give it a little bit more character and dimension, and I'm going to do that over all of the painted portions. And let me just show you the difference between the dry brushing and the plain. And I really like the way this dry brushing is looking because it's really going to coordinate better with the wallpaper that I'm using. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other wood panel. The wallpaper that I chose for this project is this gorgeous sage green with these branches and white flowers. This is a removable wallpaper, so you can definitely change this out later if you choose to, but I thought this was absolutely gorgeous, and it's going to look really well up against our frame that we just painted. So we need to take some measurements of the frame so we can cut our wallpaper down. I measured in several different areas just because it said it was square. I wanted to make sure. And then once I have those measurements, we'll flip the wallpaper over, go ahead and mark this out on the back side, draw our lines, and cut it out. I like to do a dry fitting before I remove the back paper and seal it down. I just want to make sure everything's going to fit and that I don't need to trim anything else off. Then I'll start by peeling some of the backing off and line up the two corners and that one edge and push that down. And then it's just easier if I turn it sideways, and as I'm peeling the paper off, I can push that alongside. And you can also use like a burnishing tool or something with a flat edge so you can go alongside it and push any kind of wrinkles or air bubbles out. And once I remove all of the backing, I like to go over it just to make sure that all of the corners and the sides are all pushed down. Now you could set this up, or you could actually put a hanger on the back of it, but I have this piece that I found at Hobby Lobby on sale for 50% off that actually gave me the inspiration for this piece, and I think it's going to match perfectly. We're using another one of those 12-inch wood rounds. We're going to give this a coat of black acrylic paint. It's not necessary to paint the entire piece, but I did go ahead and do that because I wasn't sure exactly where everything was going to line up. Once that's dry, we're going to add a layer of Mod Podge on the entire piece, and we'll let that dry because we're going to be covering parts of this with some cow print scrapbook paper that I found at Hobby Lobby in this book, which you could catch those on sale, but it has a lot of beautiful designs in it. Now that the Mod Podge is dried, we're going to lay that on a heat mat. We're going to measure about 4 inches up from the bottom, place our scrapbook paper on there, use our parchment paper, and then our mini iron to go over it all the way to the edges to seal that. Then we'll cut that excess scrapbook paper off and use that half to attach to the other side of the wood round. So again, we're going to measure up about 4 inches, and we'll place our scrapbook paper on there and do the exact same thing on that side. We're then going to let it cool down a little bit, and then I like to go around it, create a crease, and then take your sandpaper to go in one direction and remove all of that excess paper. Because my black paint is a little bit darker than the scrapbook paper, I'm going to take a fine grit sandpaper and just gently go over that and kind of rough it up and blend it in a little bit more. Now we're going to add a layer of Mod Podge to seal that paper in, and I'm also going to add it right in the center with the paint so everything has the same sheen. We're going to set that to the side, let it dry, and I have created another decal. This one again, the font is Hello Honey from dafont.com. Now something I wanted to share with you guys just in case you didn't know, but if you have some super sticky transfer tape, I find it is easier if you put it on a microfiber cloth and peel it up. Just do that a couple of times. It makes it a little less sticky because sometimes when you get your decal on your transfer tape, it's really hard to get off. This just kind of takes a little bit of the stickiness away. It'll still adhere to the transfer tape, but it'll be easier for you to put it on your project. It's also easier if you flip it over and kind of pull the back piece off, and that tends to help the letters stay on there easier. Now it is time, we're going to go ahead and put this on our sign. Again, this is a free printable on my website. If you guys don't have a Cricut, you can go over there and download this and trace it onto your project. Before I add any embellishments to the front, I'm going to go ahead and create a hanger on the back using some hot glue, twine, and some pieces of ribbon. We're going to be using 2 lamb's ear picks from Walmart. I do need to trim them down to size so they're a bit shorter and they fit the top part of our sign. I'm also going to bend them around to help form the shape of the top of the sign. I'm going to hot glue the 2 ends together so they're kind of flat, and then I'm going to glue some twine and wrap that all the way around the middle just to hold it together but also give us a good base to be able to hot glue this to our sign. We're going to create a bow for the top of our greenery pieces using some buffalo check ribbon and some more narrow burlap ribbon. For the buffalo check ribbon, I just determined how big I want the bow to be on each side, and then we're going to create 2 loops on each end. So once you have that folded over and you kind of know about how big you want your bow to be, you can double knot that together with some twine and then separate your 2 loops on each side. For the burlap ribbon, we're just going to make like an awareness ribbon and then take your top piece and pinch it down to the middle to create a little bow. We're going to leave 2 tails, and then we can attach that to the top of our buffalo check ribbon, double knotting it with some twine. Then we can take that piece, we'll be able to attach it to our greenery using that extra twine, and then cut the excess twine off. Then I'm going to go ahead and angle each of the tails of the burlap ribbon. You could dovetail them if you like. I just cut them at a slight angle. Then we can attach this to the top of our sign using a very generous amount of hot glue. For this project, you will need 70 of the tumbling tower pieces. We're going to glue 3 of them together side by side. We're going to create 18 sets of these. Once the glue has had time to set, go over each one of these with a fine grit sandpaper to remove any of the excess glue, but also making sure that each of the ends of these are flat. Then we're going to stain them using that same watered down antique wax mixture. Make sure to paint all sides, including the front and the back. For the next step, you'll need 16 of the tumbling tower pieces. We're going to turn them on the side, so it's the more narrow side up. You'll place one of those down, put one in between that one and another one on the end. So you want those other pieces to be on the end of this one. You're going to glue those together and then you're going to repeat that again, but for this one we're going to add 2 more pieces on each side. So it'll be 3 pieces on each side at that piece on the bottom. So it's going to look something like this. Now we're going to take a piece, place it at the bottom. We're going to glue one on top of each end. So this will be more narrow than the other ones. You'll make 2 of those. Once all of your glue has dried for a couple of hours, we're going to put these pieces together. Starting with the largest piece, we're going to take one of those more narrow pieces. We're going to glue that on one side and take the other narrow piece and glue it on the opposite side. Take the wider piece to glue at the very top. Then let your glue set up before sanding it and prepping it for paint. I'm painting mine in an acrylic paint in the color celery green. This will take 2 coats, and I painted all sides. This is how it looks once it's dry. It's an absolutely gorgeous color. Now it's time for us to put all of our pieces together. I'm using a clear Gorilla Glue since we've painted all these surfaces, and again a wet napkin. I'm going to go around this entire piece to dampen the surface so that we can attach our other wooden pieces. I'm going to start off by gluing the one set of 3 in the horizontal position at the top and repeat that on the opposite side. The next piece will go vertically, and we'll repeat that on the left hand side as well. Then we're going to take our next piece, do it horizontal on each end, making sure you push all your pieces together as you go. Right below that, we're going to do those horizontally so they match the ones above it, and then on each side of that, those will be vertically. So each of the designs are alternating. You really want to make sure you get a good seal as you apply each individual block. Continue gluing your pieces, alternating the patterns as you go, and let the glue set up overnight. Even though the glue dries clear, if you can see some of it, just very gently go over it with a fine grit sandpaper to blend that in. You just want to be very gentle with it. Now you could set this up on a plate stand or lean it up against a wall. You could create a jute hanger for the back. I had a couple of these hooks in my craft room, so I just attached them to the back with some small screws. This project, you will need 4 of the 5-gallon paint stir sticks from Lowe's. These have the rulers on the front. We're going to cut these down to 10.5 inches, and I'm using my miter box and handsaw, which I have listed in my Amazon store if you guys are interested. You'll cut all 4 of those down. Sand each of the ends, and then if you're going to stain this, you can take a fine grit sandpaper and go over that ruler part, and that will come right off. So if you're painting it, you don't have to worry about it, but if you want to stain it and you don't want that ruler to show through, you can sand that off. We're going to use 2 more of Dollar Tree's wood house-shaped pieces. This is the barcode for these if you need it. These are a bit shorter than the other ones. They're still 7 inches wide, but from the top to the bottom, they're 5 inches. Once you remove the labels, you will want to go over these with a fine grit sandpaper, especially where the labels were, just to make sure you remove any of that residual glue. Now we're going to take 2 of these faux shiplap signs from Dollar Tree. They're already pre-stained this beautiful color. Again, if this is helpful, this is the barcode. These measure approximately 4 3/4 of an inch by 7 inches. Now this is the exact width of our wooden houses. Using wood glue, we're going to glue these 2 signs together side by side. Then we're going to take those house-shaped pieces and glue 1 on each end, clamp it together, and allow your wood glue to set up. I made sure to set mine on some wax paper just in case some of that wood glue seeped through. It would stick to the wax paper and not my table. So it should be looking something like this. Now we'll take 2 of the paint sticks and add them to each side. We'll put one flush to the very bottom and the other one will be flush right there to that corner where it goes up to the peak of the house. I'm going to attach this using some wood glue, and because I only have 2 very large clamps, I'm going to have to do the bottom section first, clamp that, let that glue set up, and then I can come back and do the top section. Now that the glue has set, I'm going to go over the entire piece with a fine grit sandpaper, really making sure that I get any of that excess glue off. Depends on if you want to stain or paint it. Stain's not going to adhere to that wood glue. I like the color of the signs in the bottom of this tray, so I am going to use some painter's tape to go around the edges to cover that up, and use a piece of craft paper to tape in the center so that I don't get any paint on that. I chose to paint mine white, but you could paint yours the color of your choice. I started on the inside and worked my way to the outside. Once that coat is dry, I do want to distress it just a little bit, but this is completely optional and up to you whether or not you want to distress yours. I'm going to use some Waverly Antique Wax, a paper towel, and a dry brush. I'm just going to dip the end of the paintbrush into the antique wax and wipe most of it off, and then gently go around the edges in one direction to give it that nice distressed look. I'm going to do this on all of the edging, including the rails on each side. Now once that dries, I can remove my craft paper and my painter's tape, and this would make a beautiful centerpiece or a piece that you could sit on a side table or even use it for storage in your bathroom. Our next project, we're using 2 of these Dollar Tree signs. They measure 15 3/4 of an inch by 5 5/8 of an inch. For each sign, we will remove the twine hanger from the back as well as the label. Then take some sandpaper and sand that down nice and smooth. On the front side, we're painting the frame itself with some black paint. And make sure to get the outside edges of the sign because you will be able to see that. It's going to give it a nice, clean, finished look, and it's going to hide any imperfections in the sign. We're using 2 of these ornament-shaped signs. I think this came from Family Dollar or Dollar General for $1, but I just found this in my craft stash. I'm going to remove the hanger as well as that label, and I had to use my hairdryer to loosen that glue up to get the label off. Sand everything down, flip it over, and this one has like a metal piece on the front. We're going to remove that and sand it down as well. You will need 2 of these for this project. I'm painting both of these with the same black paint. Make sure to get the outside edges as well as the back. Now these ornaments have a beautiful like faux shiplap look on the front. We're also going to be using 2 of Dollar Tree's metal plant brackets. Again, we're not going to be able to use the screws that came with these because they're too long, so you'll need some smaller screws for this project. Now, this is the shiplap look on the front. I want to make sure I attach my bracket to the back side, the flat side. So we're going to take that bracket and attach it where the little screw holes are and make sure that it is flush to the back of the ornament. So I'm just kind of using a level to make sure I get the bracket flush to the back so I can make my marks with my marker where the screws are going to go. I'm going to drill just a pilot hole. I do not want to go through the wood. I just want it to make it easier for me to add the screws in. To reinforce it a little more, since those screws are really short, I'm going to add some permanent heavy-duty glue, in this case E6000, to the bracket, and we're going to make sure that that long piece is flush to the back and add our screws in. The screws are just going to tighten it up, make sure that E6000 gets good adhesion and it's nice and flat to your ornament piece. Remove any excess glue. It should be looking like this. You're going to do the exact same thing with the other bracket and ornament sign. Now for our frame, I need to make a hanger, so I'm going to reuse the twine that came on it, but I highly recommend that you use a heavy-duty hanger like a sawtooth hanger because the brackets are a little heavy. I am actually just using like some hot glue, some staples to reinforce it, and even more hot glue. But again, I recommend a heavy-duty hanger for this. You could add the twine just as a decorative feature. To make sure that my hangers match perfectly, I just lined each sign next to each other to make sure that they're the same length and separated in the same distance. Now we can take our bracket with our ornament on there. We're going to attach it to the center of the sign. This sign makes it super easy since it has that faux shiplap. You know exactly where to place it. Since there aren't any screw holes available, we're going to make sure we add a good amount of the permanent glue, the E6000. Then we can place this directly on our sign. I also made sure to put some glue on the back side of that ornament and use some heavy clamps to clamp that in place to make sure that your glue adheres well to your sign. Let it set up overnight. Make sure the glue has completely cured. And we're doing the exact same thing with the other sign. Now to decorate these, you can use some battery-operated candles. I highly recommend battery, not real candles, because this is hanging on the wall. You don't want a fire hazard. And this is how it looks with the candles. But to give it an even more elevated look, you could use some of these Dollar Tree glass candle holders. Again, make sure that you use a battery-operated candle like this battery-operated Dollar Tree votive candle. And if you use this method to make your sconce, make sure to adhere your glass candle holder to that ornament piece using some permanent glue. These turned out absolutely gorgeous. You guys let me know if you like it better with the glass candle holder or with the plain battery operated candles. Using these 5-gallon stir sticks from Walmart, you get 3 in a pack for $1. You're going to need 6 cut down to 13 inches and 2 cut down to 8.5 inches. The end pieces off of 2 of those, I cut about 1 inch off of the very end, and then I took my sandpaper and sanded all of those edges down smooth. Now you can cut these with your handheld miter box, which I have one of those listed in my Amazon store in my description box below if you're interested. I'm using a square so that I can line everything up, make sure it is straight, and each one of these are pushed together firmly. I'm going to take the 2 8.5-inch pieces and I'll be placing one at the top and the bottom. I measured about 1/2 inch from the bottom and the top to make a mark so I would know exactly where to place these. I applied wood glue and spread that out evenly. Then you can place it where your 1/2 inch mark is at the bottom part of your paint stick and then leave your 1/2 inch gap at the top. I placed a couple of books on there so that it would set and have firm pressure and all the glue would adhere. Once the glue has set up, you can stain this, paint it, whatever color you like or whatever stain you want. I'm going to do a very heavy white dry brush distressing. And I'm going to go over this entire front piece as well as those sides. So if you've never dry brushed before, you just dip your paintbrush into your paint and then wipe it off of the ends on a paper towel, and then you go over your piece. And I dry brushed it where it was mostly white and you just saw a little bit of that natural wood peek through. Now I'm going to take one of these Dollar Tree lock stickers as well as those two end pieces and give those a coat of black chalk paint. Now I found this gorgeous fabric in the Crafter Square section at Dollar Tree. It has some very beautiful designs on it. And I'm going to be using this metal chicken. Now yes, mine looks a little distraught because some hand soap spilled out of the bag all over it, and it kind of just ruined the, I guess, galvanized paint look they had on there. But I'm just going to use this as a template, this project. So once I decided exactly which design I want to cut out, I'm going to place the metal chicken underneath my fabric, make sure everything's kind of lined up and everything's going to look good from the front side, and then I'm going to carefully flip that over, realign it so that I can take an extra fine tip Sharpie marker and trace this out on the back side of the fabric. Just take your time and carefully go around each nook and cranny on this chicken. Then I decided to go ahead and cut it out with a little bit of excess to make it more manageable as I'm cutting it. This does take a little bit of time, but if you're just really careful, take your time and twist the fabric around, you'll be able to cut out this gorgeous chicken design. Now, once we have this cut out, this is so pretty. I am loving this so far. And our barn door has dried. We're going to attach our fabric onto the center of the barn door. I am using Mod Podge to do this and a very soft, dry brush to apply the Mod Podge. You want to apply an even layer everywhere that your fabric is going to be. And I find it's easier to center up your fabric and then pull half of it over, apply that, smooth it out, really press those edges down to make sure that it's going to adhere to the Mod Podge, and then lift the other side up and start in the center where you left the other side off. Press that down. Again, make sure you press those edges so everything seals. And even though this was a chalk paint that I painted it with, Mod Podge does leave a little bit of a different sheen. So I decided to go over the entire front of the piece except for the fabric. I did not go over the fabric with the Mod Podge. I did this so that it would all have one consistent sheen. Then we can add those two ends of those paint sticks as hinges on the side and the door lock. Now, if you can't find those stickers at Dollar Tree, you can use one of the tumbling tower pieces as a door handle. That would be just as cute. I'm going to attach all of these using hot glue. And if you want to hang this on the wall, you can just add a hanger using some jute rope on the back. I love how this project turned out, and there are so many gorgeous projects that you can create using this beautiful fabric from Dollar Tree. For our next project, we are starting off with this gorgeous DIY jewelry box that I found at Family Dollar for $3. It measures about 5 7/8 of an inch across the top, and it's about 3 7/8 of an inch tall. Now, the bottom drawer does open. The top drawer does not because the lid opens up, and that has the opening for that top drawer. The first thing I'm going to do is flip it over upside down and then take a pencil and trace around where the lid and the box meet. And this is going to provide a marking for us to add some wood to because we're going to be removing the top of this jewelry box. So it has the cutest little hinges. I'm going to remove those and set them to the side. I'm not going to use them for this project, but of course I'm going to keep them just in case I need to use them in another DIY later on. We'll set that aside for just a moment. I'm going to use some of these 12-inch ruler sticks that you can find at Lowe's in a pack of 10 for $1. We're going to be using 4 of these. I'm going to cut down 5 1/4 inch, and then from that I'll cut a 3-inch piece. So you'll have a 5 1/4 inch, a 3-inch, and then we don't need the handle part. You're going to cut down 4 of these. And then I used sandpaper to make sure that I sanded all of the cut ends nice and smooth. Then using some spackling, I'm going to fill in the holes on the back of the jewelry box. And then I'm going to take some Gorilla wood glue and glue these pieces together. Just sandwich 2 of them together so that make sure that they are flush on each end and each side. And this is going to make 2 sets of these. So you'll have 2 sets of the 3-inch pieces, and then we're going to do the exact same thing for the 5 1/4 inch pieces, gluing 2 of them together and making a set of 2. When you combine these 2 ruler sticks together, they are the exact width of the wood that was used to make this jewelry box. And you'll see why that is important in just a minute. So once that glue has set up, we're going to be attaching these where we made our marking at the top lid of the jewelry box. You want to make sure that you keep your wood pieces that you glue together on the outside of the line. So you want the line that you drew to be on the inside of where you place these wood pieces, and keep them as straight as possible, because this is going to become the lid for our lantern, and we need it to be exactly the same size as the top of the jewelry box where we took the lid off, the opening for that top drawer, so that when we put our dowels in there, everything will stay straight and even. So once I have all of those pieces in place, it should look something like this. You're going to set it aside and let that glue set up before you do any type of sanding. Now I'm going to take some 3/4 inch dowels that you find at Dollar Tree in a package, and I'm going to cut 4 of those down to 9 inches. Again, I'm going to make sure that I sand the cut ends flat so that when I assemble it, everything will sit flat. And I'm using the wood glue and applying it to one end of the dowel as well as on the side so that I can put this in the corner of the top of the lid of the jewelry box we just made. Keep everything straight and let that wood glue set up. So once it is set up, we're going to fill in all of those cracks with some spackling because I want a nice smooth finish on the lid. And I did that for both sides, allowed it to dry, and then sanded it down nice and smooth. I also took that same fine grit sandpaper and went over the entire jewelry box because it does have some rough edges on it and some rough wood. So I made sure that everything was sanded down smooth. Then I'm going to take a barbecue skewer from Dollar Tree. We're actually going to need 4 of these. And I'm going to cut those down to 9 3/8 of an inch. You want it a little bit longer than the dowels that you put on the lid. To paint my piece, I'm using Waverly's Antique Wax, applying it with a wet paintbrush, and then going over it with a wet paper towel to blend it in. And I'm going to do this for the entire pieces that you see there, the 4 barbecue skewers, the lid, as well as the jewelry box. Now you can paint yours whatever color you like. You can stain it with wood since everything's all natural wood. I chose the Antique Wax because I like the aged look that it gives once that it's dry. So now everything has dried. We're going to assemble our piece together, and I'm going to use some hot glue in each corner of the top of the actual jewelry box so that I can set the top of our now lantern down in there, push all of those dowels to the corner and hold them tightly and make sure they're straight so your lantern will be straight. So it should be looking like this. I just like to take my hairdryer and remove any of the glue strands. Then we're going to take 2 of the cut down barbecue skewers, and you're going to have to bend them just a little bit since they're taller than the lantern to get that to slide in there. And we're going to form an X on the back side of our lantern. I'm going to hold that in place using some hot glue, and I'm going to be hot gluing each end to the inside of the dowel that we have for our lantern. So you'll just put a little bit of glue there, hold it in place, and let that glue set up before you do the other end. So it should be looking a little bit like this. You're going to have them glued to the bottom on the inside of each dowel. And then you can repeat that at the top, again, gluing it to the inside of the dowel. It's going to form this perfect X. So that when we take our other two barbecue skewers and we're going to add those to the front of the lantern in the exact same way, it's going to form the exact X. So everything will meet exactly in the middle. And if you're looking at it straight forward, you'll only be able to see one X. So you kind of want everything to line up. And adding an X in the front is optional, or adding it in the back. You could just add it to one side. I wanted it on both sides. Then I'll take my hairdryer, go over it, remove any of the glue strands, and this one is so beautiful. I love how this one turned out. Now it's pretty narrow, so I'm using one of Dollar Tree's LED candles. It measures about 5 inches tall and it's about 2.5 inches in diameter, and it fits absolutely perfect inside of this lantern. I absolutely love how this project turned out. It is so pretty, and you could actually store like little mini batteries in that bottom drawer. You guys let me know what you think of this project. For our next project, we're going to use 2 of these rectangular chalkboard signs as well as the 2 chalkboard house signs from Dollar Tree. Remove the tags and hangers and staples from the back. Some of the staples are pretty easy to remove. Some of them I had to use my staple remover. I have this listed in my Amazon store in my description box below if you're interested in one of those. We're going to take the rectangular piece and attach it to the inside of the house piece with all the chalkboards facing the outside. I'm attaching this using Gorilla Wood glue in the center, spreading that out, and then I'll put a dot of hot glue on each end to hold it temporarily until that wood glue sets up. You want to make sure you keep everything straight as possible. We're going to add that one side, and then once that hot glue sets, we'll turn it around and add the other rectangular piece on that side in the same manner with the wood glue and hot glue. Then we can attach that final house piece on the end, and I just found that it was easier to flip it over and add all my glue at one time so that I can just slide that house piece up to the edge, press real firmly, and make sure everything stays straight. Wipe any excess glue off, and this is how it should be looking. Then I'm going to take some of these ruler sticks. You can get a pack of 10 at Lowe's for about $1. We're going to use 5 of those. I ended up cutting those down to about 8¼ inch long so that I can create the bottom for our toolbox we're making. Now, the 5 will be too many, so you're going to have to cut one of those pieces, trim it down. I'm attaching it temporarily using hot glue, and I'm making sure that I butt each one of those up next to the other one. When I get to that final piece, I'm going to flip it over and use my pencil and mark where I'm going to need to trim this down. So I used a utility knife and I scored it about 4 or 5 times, and then it was very easy to pop off, and then you can sand it down nice and smooth. I took the edge that I cut and made sure I placed that to the inside so the straight edge was on the outside. And since these pieces are wood, you could stain them, paint it whatever color you like. I'm going to dry brush white chalk paint around all of the wood parts, including about halfway down the inside of all 4 edges. And that's just in case you could see those inside pieces. I'm also going to take a dowel. This came in an assorted pack from Walmart, and I held that in the top corners of the houses so I could determine how far I needed to cut that down. Then I can place that in there using hot glue. This will be the handle for our toolbox. You want to press real firmly, and once the glue sets, dry brush over the handle to make it match. Now, to make it more secure, I do recommend that you take a staple gun and go around the outside edges of those paint sticks to give it a nice strong base. But this is how it's turning out. Now, if you're going to use the actual chalkboard signs to write on with chalk, You will need to season each one of these chalkboards. And to season that, all you need to do is take a piece of chalk and go over each one of these and kind of spread the chalk around and let it set a minute, and then you can wipe it off with a paper towel. This will keep it from, if you don't season it, the first time you write something on there, it will stay there forever. So it's just going to prevent it from staying there, and you'll be able to erase and draw and write whatever you want on there. So the possibilities with this little mini toolbox are endless, because you could take your Cricut and create decals, or you can add stickers, or you can write or draw on it, or you can leave it plain. I think it turned out beautiful, and there's so many different ways that you can decorate this piece. I finally found the cathedral arches at Dollar Tree. I was so excited. I'm going to remove the sign from the front and keep that because I will be putting this back on. But I did take some sandpaper because it had some rough edging on the inside, sanded that down as well as the front. Once I wipe that down, I'm going to take it outside, give it one coat of the matte black spray paint, and make sure you get in all of those grooves. Using this 5x7 wood piece from Dollar Tree, again, those outside edges are super rough, so I took some fine grit sandpaper and went over all of that, wiped the debris down. Then I'm going to use Waverly's Antique Wax, apply this with a brush, and then using a wet paper towel, blend it all in and kind of lighten it up. And as you're blending and it is lightening up, that wood grain really shows through. This is beautiful. I love the design on this piece. Now, once that dries, we're going to take our cathedral arch and apply the sign back to the center. Now, it only had one little dot of hot glue, so I made sure to apply a little bit more glue and get it centered and secured so none of the pieces pop up. Then this has corners at the end, and then the second set of corners. We're going to attach our arch on the outside edges of each of those corners. And I'm using E6000 to make sure it stays, and a little bit of hot glue just to hold it temporarily. Line it up with those two corners and press firmly and keep it straight. So it's going to look something like this. Then using a glass votive candle holder from Dollar Tree, you can get that in a pack of 4 for $1.25. And then I'm using some greenery that I already had on hand. This bundle came from Hobby Lobby. I cut a couple of stems off, and I'm going to overlap them and then bend them around to make a circle or kind of look like a wreath to go around the bottom of our votive. To hold it together, I'm going to use some floral wire and wrap it really tightly as I'm overlapping them. And then make sure that you tuck your floral wire down so you don't scratch anything or cut yourself when you are picking this up. I'm going to continue to do that on the other side, and then some of the pieces that are kind of sporadically laying around, I will overlap them on the other pieces and just use a small piece of floral wire to hold it together. Then I can set my votive candle holder down in there, use one of Dollar Tree's LED votive candles, and then set this on top of our beautiful candle holder. We're using another cathedral arch. Remove the sign and save it for later. Again, we're going to sand down in between those arches to get all of those rough edges off. And I'm using an 8x10 picture frame that I already had on hand, and the glass is already removed. Although both of the pieces are white, they're a different white. So I'm going to take them both outside and using Krylon Fusion's Paint and Primer in one in the color Matte White, I'll give each one of these 2 coats so that now they will match. Using the backing of the picture frame and some faux leather from Dollar Tree, they have black, brown, and white. I'm going to use this to cover the backing. I'm going to apply some hot glue around the border only of the backing of the picture frame, and then I can flip this over and set it directly on top of the back of the faux leather. Press firmly and make sure all of the edging have sealed, And then I could take my scissors and cut the excess off. Now you could certainly use poster board or scrapbook paper, but I wanted to use this leather because of the beautiful texture it has on it. Then I can apply this back into the picture frame, and then we'll take our cathedral arch and reapply the sign to the front. But before we attach our arch to the leather on the picture frame, we're going to remove the hanger from the back so that it will sit flat, but we're going to reinsert that screw so that the two pieces will stay together. Then using some E6000 and hot glue, we can attach this to the center of our picture frame directly to the leather. And I love how this piece turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this project, we're using just one of those wood decorative trays and some of these wooden snowmen from Dollar Tree. If you don't have any of these in your Christmas stash or you can't find them at your Dollar Tree, I did find something similar on Amazon, and I'll have that linked in my Amazon store if you're interested. We're going to take 4 of those and we're going to hot glue 1 in each corner. So you're going to glue the bottom of the snowman to the bottom of your tray. To prep this for paint, I'm going to make sure I remove all of those glue strands. I'm using a white chalk paint. I'm going to paint the top edges as well as the inside sides of the wall. You don't need to paint the bottom inside of the tray because we're going to put something different there. Then we're going to flip that over. We're not painting the outside edges of the tray. We're only going to paint the feet and the bottom. Once dry, this is how it should be looking. We are going to be covering the outside sides as well as the inside with some scrapbook paper. So I'm going to take some measurements for the inside dimensions as well as measure the outside side. So I'm just going to measure the highest point and then the length across. I will be cutting my paper down a little bit larger for the sides. I'm using a distressed floral print scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby, but you can use whatever you like, or you could even paint these. It would still come out just really beautiful, the sides and the bottom. I'm going to cut the width that I need down for the sides, then cut out the exact measurement for the inside bottom of the tray. Then I can cut those long pieces down to the size that I need for each of the sides. So again, the sides are going to be larger than the actual sides because we want to have enough scrapbook paper to go all the way around those sides. So to attach them, I'm going to be using some Mod Podge, and I'm going to apply a very thick layer, not super thick. You don't want it kind of oozing off the sides, but you want a good layer on there to make sure your scrapbook paper adheres well. I'm lining the straight line up at the bottom of the tray, press it down, and then we're going to flip it over and do the opposite side. We're not going to go, from one side to the next to the next. We're going to do this side, flip it over, and do the opposite side. I found that to kind of speed up that Mod Podge process to make sure it seals good, just take a piece of parchment paper and a mini iron or a household iron and go over that to make sure it seals all the edges, and it's just going to seal it really quick, and you don't have to really wait on that Mod Podge to dry. Now, if you have some really thick scrapbook paper like I do, you could go just directly over it and really make sure you get those creases so you know exactly where to take your sandpaper to get the excess off. I'm going to use a fine grit sandpaper, go in one direction and remove that excess paper off of that side. Then I'll go over the top and get all those curves at the top of this tray. Once I've finished with that side, I'll flip it over and do the same thing on the opposite side. I made sure to wipe everything down to remove any of that paper dust and debris before doing the exact same thing on the other two sides. I am absolutely loving how this is turning out, and now that the sides are complete, we can add our paper to the inside bottom of the tray, and this project will be finished. We're using one of Dollar Tree's large gift bags that you would put a wedding gift into. I absolutely love the floral design on this. I'm going to cut the top third as well as the bottom third off. That is the pattern that I want to use for this project. I'm going to carefully pull this apart so that I'm only left with one layer. I am trying not to mess up any of the flowers because a lot of the flowers that I want to use are on the sides of the gift bag. So once I have that cut down, I do want to try to thin this out because the bag is very thick. So I'm going to take a piece of packing tape, place that down, and then very carefully pull it up so that it removes the back layer of the bag just to thin it out a bit. And I'm going to do this over all of the sections that I need for this project. You will have to use a new piece of tape each time, and just take your time and be very careful not to tear the design on the front. I'll do that for both pieces of the bag. I'm using one of Dollar Tree's 12-inch wood rounds. Remove the hanger and then lay a ruler so I can make a mark at the 4.5-inch and 7.5-inch measurements. Then add a layer of Mod Podge to the top only, spreading that out all the way to the edges. You want to have a nice even coat across the entire front. While the Mod Podge is setting up, I do want to try to remove some of the creases from this bag. So I'm going to lay this on a heating mat, place a piece of parchment paper over it, and then using a small iron, gently go over it and try to flatten this out so that they're less noticeable. I have my iron set on around 365. I'm going to do that for both pieces. Using a square, I'm going to line up my wood round so I can try to make sure everything stays straight. I want the curve of the flowers to go at the bottom, so I'm going to place that straight edge at that 7.5-inch mark and press it down. Then I can add my top piece with the flowers curved toward the top at the 4.5-inch mark and press that down. Then I can take my parchment paper and go over each one of these to iron it out and seal it to the wood round. It's going to help remove some more of those wrinkles and really adhere this to the wood round. Continue to do that for the other piece as well. Using a piece of sandpaper, or I'm using my finger sander, I'm going to go around this in one direction to remove that excess paper. This is going to give you a crisp, clean line all the way around. Once I have that completed, I will take the end of a very small paintbrush to poke through the holes for the wood round so that we'll be able to add our hanger later on. Using my Cricut cutting machine, I created this decal using this gorgeous gold premium vinyl. I know that not everyone has a Cricut, so I do have this as a free printable on my website. The link to that is in my description box below. All you have to do is go to my website, go to free printables, scroll down until you find the design you want to use. You can print that out on PDF, and then you can trace this and place it on your project using a marker or paint. We're going to add a twine hanger back to the top of our wood round, double knotted in the back, and this project is complete. You could add some florals or a bow to the front, but I think this turned out absolutely gorgeous just the way it is. Hope you enjoyed today's video and found tons of inspiration. If you have a favorite, please let me know in the comment section down below, because I always love to know which one is your favorite. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I'll see you guys next time.